welcome back, guys. Today I have two pro cyclists with me. I've got Lizzie Holden from UAE Team ADQ, and I've got Nick Schultz, or Schultz, as I know him mostly, from Israel Premier Tech. And they're here to join me chatting about Pock-it Fuel, which I've been recommending to all my athletes to go and check out and make some of their recipes. So thanks for joining me, guys.
Yeah, no worries. Thanks for having us.
Yeah, thanks for having
I
us.
think this is our first, definitely my first podcast. You've probably done a few over the years, but
First podcast for
food.
nutrition.
Yeah, oh, that's interesting. First one for nutrition. And first one with the two of you together. I wasn't sure if I was going to get you both in the same place or both in different locations. So it's nice actually having it the same place.
Rare opportunity, actually.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know some of those challenges of when you're a pro rider is that you're on the go, you're moving all the time, and you're always traveling. And so yeah, like Pock-it Fuel, where did that come from, and how? Like, tell us more.
I guess it's something that I've always enjoyed over the years, like the nutrition side of it and baking.
Yeah.
And you've always kind of like hinted, oh, you should do something on Instagram, like people would really love this, but I was always like a bit, I don't know, nervous, or like I was like, gosh, I don't think anyone's really that interested. Like,
yeah.
And then I had Epstein-Barr or mono, whatever you want to call it, in February. So I had a lot of free time, and I needed something really to like distract myself from not racing or training. And I guess that's when I was like, okay, maybe now's the time to start something. And like, if it goes well, it goes well. If not, it doesn't really matter. It's just something I enjoy.
And more food need to test. So that's a win for me.
Yeah, absolutely. It's like your chief testing officer.
Yeah, 100%. And I think like that's where I always encourage Lizzie to try and do something more publicly, because I've been so lucky over the years. I mean, like this has been ongoing for years. Like I just have awesome ride food, and I go on rides with friends and pull out something from my pocket, and they're like, "Whoa, man, what's that?" Like, and I don't know, Lizzie whipped this up last night, but it's awesome, you know. And I think with Lizzie's knowledge in nutrition, it's really nice for me or for us to like to go training with food that tastes really good, and also is actually geared towards training rather than just like a real tasty cake from a bakery.
Yeah. Absolutely.
I think like sports nutrition is something we've both generally been really interested in. Like if there's new studies, we're always like, oh, have you seen this? And I guess Pock-it Fuel is also like something a bit more accessible to everyone, because at the end of the day, we both have our sponsors with the team, but like, sports nutrition is expensive, like the products. So if you can make it yourself and also have the understanding of what is going into what you're eating, I think it's quite beneficial.
Absolutely. I think I often talk about, you kind of got everyday nutrition, training nutrition, and race nutrition. They're all connected, but they've got different roles. And then the more you train, the more you need to fuel, and the more you fuel, the more you realize how important that fueling is. But then you also realize, like, I don't want to just be having that same one gel or one drink all the time. And I think it's a conversation I've had a lot behind the scenes with pro riders about how the longer people have been riding, the less that they're using their sports nutrition brands when they're training, because you get sick of it. You get flavor fatigue, and you get you're like, oh, do I have to have another one of those gels or another one of those bars? So like making your own stuff, like as you say, means it costs a fraction of the amount, and you're not then thinking like, oh man, this ride is going to cost me 50 euros because I'm going out for 6 hours and I've got to have 80, 100, whatever grams of carbs per hour. And if that's coming from a sports, like a commercial product, it quickly ramps up.
Yeah. But even now, like you see, like in the supermarkets, it's quite hard to actually find something with a reasonable amount of carbs. Like if you look at all the cereal bars now, it's like, I don't know, reduced sugar, or which of course
high protein
has its place, but when you need something for energy, it's not ideal. And I think that's like where the Rice Krispie thing came from, because like in the UK we have Squares bars,
Yeah.
And Oz, you
But
have
in his LCM.
LCM.
Yeah, but the LCMs have gotten smaller and smaller over the years.
Yeah, the portion size, and it's like you got like 5 grams, and then yeah.
Yeah, like
Yeah.
you're probably getting about 7 grams of carbs per LCM now versus like when I was a kid, they were probably 40.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Because then there's so many products and brands that are out there that yeah, they're trying to they're going for a mass market, and they're aiming them as being snacks, and
Yeah.
then in order to make it like snack friendly, it's like, oh yeah, let's just like cut the portion in half, and yeah, it's still got the same amount of sugar, but then you've got to eat 3 times of them to get a normal portion.
Or it's advertised as a protein bar with 3 grams of protein.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. And yeah, like with those Rice Krispie bars, I was like, I've got a whole batch of them in the fridge and in the freezer. We're just talking before we started recording how I've been super impressed at how well they freeze, because I think something I find is challenging for a lot of people is they're short on time, and that's something I get a lot of people like, oh, I don't have time to do anything. I don't have time to do anything. And with rice cakes, like if you're making in the rice cooker or on a pot, that might take you 20 minutes to cook it plus the fridge setting time. But the Rice Krispie bars, like I made them in like less than 10 minutes, and it's 3 ingredients, and they're so tasty, and they last really a long time in your pocket as well as the fridge or the freezer.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I woke up the other day with no ride food and made a batch of Rice Krispies before I went for a ride. Like it's so easy, you know. And that's the biggest win, I think, with Rice Krispies. And that's also how I sort of personally got it over the line with our team soigneurs, is that like it was about convincing the soigneurs, who are the people that make all our non-nutrition sponsored food, that it's actually easier than what you're doing. And I think if you can highlight to them that something's easier and more time efficient, then they're first of all going to listen. And then, when they saw how easy it was, they were all in.
Yeah. So when they're on the road, are they making in the rice cooker?
I think they do, no? No, they melt the marshmallows in the rice cooker.
The marshmallows in the rice cooker and the butter. They they just, I guess, mix in the Rice Krispies and
it's interesting because I've seen some dietitian, someone making just cooking meals in a rice cooker. I'm like, oh, that's interesting. I've only ever used my rice cooker as a rice cooker. But then, when you're on the team in a team camp, like I'm about to go to Austria with DSM, and you've probably just going backwards and forwards from camps yourself. They don't always have kitchens or cooking supplies when you're on tour at the Grand Tours. You just never know what you're going to get, and so you need something that's portable, that can be used low mess, easy to clean. And these Rice Krispie cakes, I mean, they're so portable and easy to eat, which is going to be easier for you guys, because you get the same amount of energy in a Rice Krispie cake, but a fraction of the weight compared to a traditional rice cake.
Yeah, I think it's definitely been the most popular recipe. I guess people like something super quick and easy. So it's been great for that. And you can make it whatever you want, whatever flavor. Yeah, it's pretty easy.
I think that's, as you said, that whatever flavor is something I pitch to people a lot about. The benefit of making your own ride food is that you can adapt it to your preferences, because different times of the year, when it's really, really hot or it's really, really cold, you might go through like a period of time where you want everything like chocolate flavored, and then it gets really hot and you're like, oh, you go off chocolate. And if you're relying just on commercial products, it limits your options. Whereas when you make your own stuff, there's so many doors and different things that you can try.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that's, like you mentioned before, like the flavor fatigue. It is like, okay, there's sports brands which have really great stuff, but if you're having that, say you're doing a 20-hour week, you don't want to be having 20 of those every day. So it's nice to be able to change it up and kind of choose what you're eating and mix it up a bit.
Oh, 100%. And it doesn't matter what the brand is. I mean, the one that I always hear, it's always Cliff Bars, that people have overcooked at some point, because they've gone and done a race or an event and had 10 Cliff Bars, and now they're like, oh, the thought of it makes them feel ill. Whereas one a month or one every couple of weeks or one a week isn't going to break the bank, but that might only be the fuel you need for the first hour of a ride. And so it's interesting to hear you saying they're using these foods more in the races as well, compared to just having the real food in training. So like, how do you feel for you, the mix is it changed in the last few years about having a combination of real food compared to just having the gels, or is it about the same?
I think it's pretty personal.
Yeah.
It's probably also a little bit dependent on the team you ride for when you're at a race. So some teams, Swan-Yo's put a lot of effort into making, food like Rice Krispies or doing things like that, little paninis, to give you that option to try and avoid flavor fatigue. Whereas some teams, I think, heavily rely on their sports nutrition partner, and they only have the options of the bars and gels that are provided, and the drinks, I guess. And then I think a lot of it is kind of how easy people find it to actually eat in a race. A lot of people don't want to be chewing during a hard moment. Whereas in training, you've always got time to sort of eat a solid piece of food. For me personally, I think I still eat a lot of solid food in the race because I like the sensation of chewing.
Yeah.
And so I think in pretty much every stage of every race, I'll still have between 4 and 8 Rice Krispies, and then move to like different nutrition sponsored bars, and then gels. And I think it becomes more and more liquefied towards the back end of the race. Whereas in training, it's far more solid based, and I'll take some really dense carbohydrate gels, like a 45-gram carbohydrate gel, to really periodize around the really intense moments of that ride, where I know that I want a big hit quickly and fast, and maybe there's not much time in between efforts where I want to be chewing on a Rice Krispie. But I think it's really quite personal.
I think I'm the same. Like, yeah, it really depends, because also, like, obviously racing is very different to training. There's a lot more factors that go into it, like the stress, the nerves, like all of that could affect like the gut problems. And I think myself personally, our nutrition sponsor has like specific ratio of fructose, glucose products. And I think from personal experience, that helps the gut problems in racing. But I still do sometimes prefer to have like, if there's chance, now racing's getting faster and faster. Like there's not much time to enjoy a piece of food at the start of a race. But yeah, normally it's like the solid homemade stuff in the first half or first third of the race, and then gels, drinks, everything.
I think drinks have come a long way in the last few years with the brands. I think they've got a lot more knowledge on the ratios. And sort of I think they've changed quite a bit in terms of like sodium and electrolyte content. They're a little bit easier on the gut. So I think that's definitely something in racing. I have far more carbohydrate drink than I would in training. Also because I guess in training you have 1 or 2 bidons, so the maximum you can start with is 2 carbohydrate bidons, and unless you're taking sachets with your ride, you're not going to be sort of stocking up with more carb drink.
It's then having to rely, if you are stopping and wanting liquid carbs at the petrol station, and grabbing a Coke or an Aquarius or a Fanta or something like that to top you up. Has your, like you talk about the pace of the peloton getting faster, and that's something I've definitely had that conversation with some of the female pro riders that I work with, say in the last year especially, just like they're getting dropped in races that didn't used to get dropped in, and the pace going up. Have you, the both of you, found that the amount that you're fueling has increased over the years as well with that?
Yeah, for sure. We were just talking before about like some stories of like, I remember like doing club rides like when I was 13, 14, and sometimes you'd do like 3 hours and just be like waiting for the cafe stop, like no food, and then get to the cafe and just have like, I don't know, 2 pieces of cake, toast, and then like you'd leave like cross-eyed, like I've got to go an hour home now. But Yeah, it's just crazy how much it's changed.
Yeah, I mean, for me, it's been the biggest change in my career has been nutrition. And I think my own progress and consistency, I can pretty much single-handedly put down to enhancements in nutrition. And I think from my side, when I first turned pro or when I was an under 23, it wasn't through intention that I was doing the wrong thing. It was just lack of knowledge and education. And I think I was very quickly convinced by nutritionists when they told me to fuel more. I never had like a sort of, some sort of negative stigma around eating a lot. So it was music to my ears to be told, eat more to go faster, rather than sort of that old school thinking of eat less to go faster. So I adapted the sort of, fueling for the work required sort of method really quickly, and noticed a massive change in consistency. And then I was fully hooked on the idea, and every chance I get at a race, I will do a full on calculated plan, because I just noticed such a huge change. The difference is massive. I think first time I was doing Grand Tours, I reckon I was eating 1 bar an hour in stages, and I thought that was good. And then you'd get on the bus and you'd have some guys be like, "Oh, I only had 2 gels in the whole stage today. How good is that?" And it's like you didn't. It was just lack of knowledge, And it was,
and it's a culture thing. Like, I mean, that was a big part of like my doctorate research. Was I was like, okay, why are people so resistant to eat? I'm like, this can make such a difference to your speed, your power, your performance, your career. And I'm like, performance enhancer, like not just milliseconds, it's like minutes, if not hours, depending on the duration of the event or the race. And that culture of like eating's cheating is so deeply enriched, and it's so nice seeing that it's changing in both the pro and the amateur field, because by people putting it into practice and testing it out. And that's what I'm always encouraged, like, don't just take my word for it, like put it to the test. And then when you put it to the test and you feel different, you're like, oh wow, like I'm not as hungry at the cafe. That's weird. Like I don't need to eat 3 dinners after this ride because I ate enough in the ride now.
For sure. That's also like why the sport is crazy fast now. Like,
and the riders who are dictating that speed are young riders, because I would say, like you say, it's so cultural, and you see it with my generation and above. There's still so much stigma around scales of food, and it's like it's looked at as if you're weighing your food, you've got an issue. It's not looked at as you're enabling performance, and actually weighing this food, you're eating more because you're weighing it. It's taking away the guesswork. And it's so common to hear older riders say, "Oh, look at that guy weighing his food. Like, oh, I don't need to weigh my food. I know what I need to eat because I can feel it." And it's like, well, actually, you probably need to eat a lot more than what you are feeling that you need. And it's really funny, like that psychology, and it's actually kind of annoying to see, because they haven't quite clocked onto the fact that these young guys who are coming in and absolutely smashing all of us older guys, it's because they're doing this stuff, from a younger age. They have the knowledge that we didn't have, and they're applying that knowledge, and they don't have this, this negative attitude towards fueling for performance. They understand it, and they know no different.
I remember having a conversation, because we were saying before how I was doing the food and nutrition for a camp with you with Green Edge in Andorra a couple of years ago. And I remember there was a couple of the guys in the team that were retiring that year in the like sort of mid-30s, and they were talking about power meters and how the influence that had on training, and how the numbers the guys in the early 20s were getting were the numbers they were aiming to achieve by the time they got to the late 20s and 30s, and how just even that specificity of training has enhanced the peloton. But then with nutrition, like if you don't have the fuel in the tank, then like it doesn't matter how fast and strong you are in theory, like you're just not going to be able to like put it out there.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, and like 5, 6, 7 years ago, I'd have training sessions. You'd go out there, you'd do one effort, you'd nail it, and then by the second or third, you'd be absolutely stuffed. And
Yeah.
that doesn't happen anymore. And
Yeah.
for me, it's so obvious why. I'm
Yeah.
well built. I'm limited by physical capacity rather than bonking or hunger flatting mid-session.
And for sure,
Yeah.
like the recovery, like in the Tour de France and stage races in general, like the recovery post stage is so important now. Whereas I remember when I first started racing, like you'd wait maybe 2 hours after a race because you just weren't hungry.
Yeah, well, I started a podcast with Georgie Howe 2 weeks ago and or last week, and we were talking about the study she did about Tour de France Femme and how essentially if she was trying to match energy expenditure, she needs to be eating 7,500, like she needs 7,500 calories a day, and she was maybe able to eat 5,000, but because of that deficit, it's influence and you just can't play catch up. If you're expending that much energy, which is equivalent to the men, in these sorts of stages, these races, like you can't eat 5,000 calories for dinner. And this is where that whole, like, as you say, fueling for the what's required, fueling for the work required, getting the food in the training session means that there's still a deficit going on, but you're not in such a deep hole that it's going to take you the whole week to recover, and you get to stage 2 and you're like, yeah, not going to happen anymore.
Yeah, for sure.
So that's cool to hear, that it's made a big difference for you. And I'm interested to hear about the weighing side of things as well, Schultz, because I remember on that camp you weighing food and talking about how it was helpful for you, even if you didn't need to weigh it, just as reassurance, that you're getting enough in versus the restrictive mindset of like, how little can I eat? You're actually, no, I want to be able to eat more, and I need more.
Yeah, I mean, again, everyone's different, but for me, I loved the idea of just taking the guesswork out of it.
Yeah.
And I'm not an expert in nutrition, um, just like I'm not an expert in coaching. So the way I saw it is I have a coach who tells me what to do on the bike. And if we have a nutritionist, access to a nutritionist on a team who's spent their whole lives studying to be an expert in this field, they probably know more than me about nutrition. So if they tell me to eat this, they probably know what they're talking about. And I it was very difficult to sort of, disagree with them because I didn't have the knowledge. And again, through practicing, I think it was first with Sam Impey and Nikki Strobel in a welter years ago that I was sort of a test dummy, and I think they knew I'd be on board for it.
Yeah.
And just like immediately I noticed a change. And from that point on, I was like, why aren't I doing this also at home? Well, because if this makes me feel this good in a race, maybe I can train better and harder and more consistently. And it's become kind of normal for me now to actually weigh food at home all the time. Not from a view of I need to eat less, or this is the goal is not always losing weight. On the contrary, if I were to be weighing food now, it's to maintain where I'm at, to make sure I'm eating enough. I don't need to lose weight. The goal isn't always to have a lower number on the scales. And I think there is also this sort of misconception that if you're weighing food, you can't eat bad food, or if you're counting calories, you're not allowed to log, the ice cream you eat after dinner, or that piece of chocolate, or McDonald's or whatever. At the end of the day, like, just because you're counting calories or you're weighing your food doesn't mean it needs to have a negative impact on your
relationship.
on your relationship with food. And I actually see it as the opposite. I think it's almost I really like food, and I also really like bad food. And through through counting calories at times and stuff, I've actually seen it can enable me to have those things, when it fits on the day. And I see that as empowering and actually, like, liberating.
Yeah, well, it's being intentional with your food choices, because there is so much shame and guilt around food and like the labels of it being bad, and it's not necessarily good or bad unless you're allergic to it, or it's poisoned, or it's like physically off. Like it comes down to the portions, the timings, the frequency, all that side of things. And yeah, there's no such thing as a perfect food, a perfect day, perfect diet. Everyone has different needs, and there's a time when you need that high energy food, like the Rice Krispies. If you need to eat 150 plus grams of carbs at breakfast, like trying to eat that just from like oats or whole grain bread, like the volume and the time it's going to take you to eat that is massive compared to something that's a bit
Chocolate
lower in
drizzly.
volume. Yeah, exactly. And so this is where it's the like recognizing there's a time and a place. Whereas if you were on a rest day or a rest week and you ate that, you eat a big bowl of it and you're like hungry 5 minutes later, and then you have another bowl, and then before you eat, the whole box is gone. And so when you're aware of like, okay, this equals this, you're able to sort of like mix and match and play around with what do I need to get out of this food in this moment.
Yeah, and for sure, like obviously everything has different nutritional content. It's not saying like if you just have the right amount of calories, you'll be fine. But like,
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, I think because for me, I look at tracking being like there is a tool, and some people, like you, like they like doing all the time because it gives them reassurance that they're having enough, keeps them on track so they're not under fueling unintentionally, and other people it adds stress. So it is really about like the person, but I find it so helpful to look at. For me, it's the patterns when I'm looking at a food diary. Like generally, the numbers don't change. It's just the distribution and the timing and what that consists of, because patterns. I'll see someone like all their food is coming in snacks, and like, oh, I'm just addicted to snacks, and I'm like, and I'm hungry all the time. I'm like, yeah, but you didn't eat any ride, you didn't have any breakfast, like there's no protein in your lunch. It's like, well, yeah, this makes sense, like that this is why. And so you then try something new and you're like, oh, that's weird, I wasn't hungry. You're more likely to try do that next time as well.
For sure. Like I feel like it's very individual, and it's easy for us to say that weighing isn't a problem, but I understand that also for some people it can be a trigger and it's stressful. But I think like creating that positive relationship with like the knowledge of what you're eating is important, and it's not easy to do for some people, but
no, and I think that culture you're in makes a big difference, because I've talked with guys and girls on teams where they have a really positive culture around food and they're encouraged to eat, and then also riders that are on teams where like they're questioned on everything that goes into the mouth, no matter what the time. And even in training, like, do you really need to have 4 gels? Like, yeah, you can get away with 2. And they're like, no, I'm having 4. And learning to build up that internal resolve of like, no, this is important, and I know you're trying to derail me, but you don't know what you're talking about because you're not actually an expert in this field.
We have a really good nutritionist this year. She's from the Netherlands, and I think it's the first time it's really been like pushed to fuel a lot, like after training, before training, like, and I think it has been a shock for a lot of girls. Like they see this big bowl of pasta and they're like, I can't finish that. Like, I don't need all this. Like, it's still a big adaptation is needed. But I've also had nutritionists in teams in the past where like maybe not consciously, but they've definitely created like this stigma around certain foods, like cereal, like chocolate cereal is seen as bad, or like
Nutella or peanut butter.
Nutella is probably the famous one. Like,
give me a rest.
I think this is for me, like I find that the longer I've worked as a dietitian, because I've come into sports nutrition from a dietitian background, and so I've always got that psychology and behavior change. Like I think when I first started studying, I was like, why are we doing psychology at uni? This makes no sense. And like, what's that got to do with food? The longer I work, I'm like, oh, it's got everything to do with food, because it's not like, here's your meal plan, go and eat it. Like some people can do that, but you've also got all these other influences around that are affecting you. And and to tell someone like, oh, I want you to eat double the amount of food that you're eating, like that's usually too big a jump. And being able to help people slowly increase it, and like weight is a topic of concern for a lot of riders. And I mean, I sort of joke and jest, and like, well, if I made people gain weight that wanted to lose weight, I'd be quickly out of a job. But I know that I know that so many people can be fueling at a higher level than they are, but it's the quality, the timing, and the distribution, and helping avoid reds or stress from like low energy availability. But like the baby steps and making it work with their lifestyle. And I think it's cool to hear that you're finding it also then translates to how, like, when you have that inclusion of the Nutella or the Rice Krispies or those extra foods in your racing season, in my experience, it helps then when you get into off season that you're able to maintain your weight rather than the traditional old school restriction and then gain 10 kilos and then you've got a week to lose it before you go back racing again.
Yeah, for sure.
Still might happen.
Still not happen. Yeah.
Maybe not 10, maybe like 3 or 4.
Yeah. Well, I think that
like the psychology thing's interesting because I also think nutritionists get a bad rap in cycling. You know, it's like riders riders dislike working with a nutritionist. And I think that's the rider's fault. And because what I've noticed over the last 2 years is this has really become a thing. You know, when I first started doing it, I felt like I was the only guy, or, you know, one of a very few minority that were really investing in this idea. But what a lot of riders don't understand is that, well, at least with my experience, not one nutritionist has ever wanted to like make my eating robotic. Very, very open, very understanding that nutrition is individual. I know I have really bizarre eating habits compared to some other riders.
Sorry, I'm laughing because I know how much yogurt and
exactly
muesli you eat.
I think everyone knows that now.
Yeah. It's kind of a reputation I have, and that's something I'm not willing to change because I love yogurt and I love cereal. But what I've found really amazing is that every nutritionist I've worked with, and I've worked with quite a few different ones now, they have never tried to make me change that. They see this is how I operate. They see this is what I like to eat, and it's just incorporated into the daily goal.
It's like, all right, my like, okay, I had bircher muesli and yogurt for breakfast, and I'm also having it straight away when I get in off the black. And it's like, so we're making a double batch because we know that whatever's left over is going into your ride nutrition, versus instead of having the pasta or the rice that was meant to be for lunch.
Exactly, and that's like, I think a lot of riders don't understand that if they work together with their nutritionist, they can come up with these plans that actually will really work well for them. I don't want to come home from training and have a bowl of pasta. I don't feel like it. But I know that I can use other foods to hit those same targets and still be fueling correctly. You know, maybe it's not perceived as healthy or as normal, but you know, I'm hitting the targets that I need to sort of, you know, fuel that work required. And I think there's a lot of riders out there that are nervous to work with a nutritionist because they think it's going to change their entire eating habit. And it's just not.
And I like you say that there's always there probably is some nutritionists out there that will be in that restrict, and that might have been their experience and why they've got that fear and avoidance. But I think it's fantastic that the ones that you've worked with and been exposed to have been inclusive and incorporated, because I find that that's what makes it sustainable for anyone, like a diet or any sort of dietary pattern. In order for it, you've got to be able to maintain weight. You've got to be able to stick with it for months and years. And yeah, with race, you might have your race weight in season and then off season, a couple of kilos up and down, but that's manageable versus like gaining like 10 kilos and then be really stressed and the weight loss is more likely to affect your performance and stuff. And yeah, when you enjoy food, like food is great, and enjoying the food you're eating is part of the process. And for example, I think everyone should be like on a plant-based diet in the sense of plants forming a large part of their diet, but I don't think it has to be plant exclusive. And I've got friends and clients that are vegan and full supporters of it, and I've tried it, and when I'm going vegan, I start hating food and I'm not enjoying the food that I'm eating, even though it's delicious. It's not as enjoyable because I like the things like the yogurt or the cheese or the meat and fish or whatever. And so finding that balance and the food combinations that you like that work for you and adapting them around it so it makes you fit your needs is such an important part of it.
Yeah, for sure.
100%.
Yeah, that's yeah. Really cool to hear. I suppose before we wrap up, do you guys have any final words of wisdom or fueling tips for anyone out there that's kind of on the fence about eating on the bike?
I don't know about like that general, but I think my tip would be practice in training before going to an event, because I think that's also something you see a lot, like people train with maybe 40, 50 grams of carbs an hour, and then they go to a race and expect to consume like upwards of 90, 100, 120, and then wonder why they're having all these gut problems. So for sure, practice anything before racing.
I agree. Yeah,
100%.
I agree. Like, because you test it out in training. That's all. You got your everyday nutrition training and your racing, and you've tested it in training. You get confident on it, and then you know, like, I can have 3 gels, or I can have, or if I have that 4th gel, like, oh, it just starts sitting a bit funny in the gut. But if I have that gel with a rice cake or a Rice Krispie, like that combo, winner.
Yeah.
No, I think it's really important as well. Yeah, you know, plan your nutrition and training, practice it. I don't know the tips in particular. Have fun with it, because
enjoy it.
Like,
I think that's also the idea of Pock-it Fuel, like make it fun, interesting, like not just this is 30 grams of carbs, you have to eat this, even if you don't like the flavor. Like
I genuinely look forward to unwrapping the stuff that Lizzie makes on the bike, you know,
you also
it's
make
like
stuff.
it's the highlight. Yeah, I'm less advanced, but you know, it's something that I think is really important to have a positive relationship. And I think you can also you know, train that somewhat by having food that you like to eat on the bike, rather than just popping a gel or opening.
Which also I think it changes that relationship, because if you got that biscuit or that cookie or that you actually want to eat, like, rather than having that, like, oh no, it's bad, I can't have it, avoid, restrict, and wanting it more and then eating it and then feeling guilty, and that's like just spirals and goes around in circles. You'd be like, okay, this is equivalent to a gel. What would I rather have? What's more appropriate for this situation? Like, oh, I'd much rather have that piece of cake or that Rice Krispie, and having that. And as you say, you look forward to it, because versus be like, oh, I have to have another gel, or I have to have this other bar again.
And for sure, I think, like we said before, like stuff changes in races and training, like training for long rides. I think a lot of us, maybe not everyone, but like I try and include some protein, whereas in a race that's not necessary. It's just going to slow down the absorption. So like,
oh, for sure.
And change everything in training. Like it doesn't have to be the same food as racing, if that makes sense. Like,
I was actually just going to ask, do you ever make salty or savory sort of foods? Because that's like a question, something that I recommend to people. The longer the rides they're doing, the more they start thinking about incorporating salty or savory options. But I know the stuff you've made so far is predominantly sweet, but do you ever make any salty things?
Trying to get Vegemite into the mix. I'm pushing like some Vegemite.
A lot of people have asked for salty stuff, and like I think we're both very sweet-toothed people, so we don't get that boredom, but I can also understand why a lot of people don't want sweet.
I reckon like I've used Vegemite. Like I've tried in the past making like a Vegemite, because I think I'd seen a recipe that was based on like Marmite and cheese and leeks, and it was kind of a bar, but it was still a bit sweet, so it didn't quite work. But I think with Vegemite, it's got to be more like a bread based, or like but kind of like the Vegemite cheese and Vegemite scrolls. So that sort of thing would probably work well. Just experimenting with how to, or even like, I don't know, like pastry sort of thing, that probably would work well.
It's hard to find like something ingredient wise that also, you know, is good for the nutritional content of the food.
Like, I was literally just thinking
like all these brownies, and I'm like, they'd be so good, and then you look at the ingredients and you're like, okay, maybe maybe not.
I mean, but this is, as you say, like of adapting the foods. The brownies, they've got high fat content, but maybe not so great in the race context where you don't need or want as much of the fat. But in the training, if you're doing more like steady state rides or longer rides, even in the same ride, it's that whole manipulating. You're not going to be just using the drinks and gels and liquids in the whole ride. There'll be periods of that in the intensity efforts or the sprint efforts you do, but the warm up, the cool down, that's where you can have these other things that have higher fat that helps support the fueling and the recovery. You enjoy it, and it's not going to be necessarily impacting you so much. So yeah, it is really playing around with the ingredients depending on the context of what you're trying to get out of that fuel session.
Yeah.
I also think just one other tip or lesson is, if you're skeptical about how much it can really have an impact, test it. Go and do like a session.
This is music to your ears, no?
Go and do a session, I don't know, like 3 or 4 10-minute threshold efforts. Fuel like you normally would. I don't know, 20, 30 grams an hour. Then go do it and fuel at 80 or 100. And see the difference in the efforts, because I think like the proof will be in the pudding. I'm 100% sure the efforts will be there.
I can vouch for that too.
Like 100%. I don't have any doubt. And I think that's the biggest thing, is once you see how much this can improve your performance, it changes the game. And people talk about climbing records in the Tour de France and average speed, and but they're wearing aero skin suits and fast bikes.
Like milliseconds.
It's all mumbo jumbo marketing. The reason we're going so fast is because we're well fueled and everyone's doing it. And if you're not doing it, you're getting left behind.
Out the back. 100%. Like that testing element. I mean, I give the same advice all the time, like eat more, eat more, eat more. And people are like, no, it won't work for me, won't work for me. I'm like, have you tried it? No. It's like, well, how do you know? And I'm like, and I find sometimes it takes people days, if not weeks, of me saying like, eat this. And it might be 10 grams more, 20 grams more, these tiny changes. And they're like, oh, it's going to make me gain weight, or whatever fear they've got about it. Like, and then they finally do it and they're like, oh my goodness, that was a game changer. I'm like, exactly. This is why I'm trying to tell you to do it. So yeah, it's great hearing it from your perspective as well, to see how much of an impact it's had on you. And then I love seeing the recipes that you've been creating and sharing and supporting them. So yeah, hopefully you'll get a few more fueling fans.
Yeah, the Vegemite and cheese
I'll leave that one to you.
It's gonna happen.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, I look forward to after experiment. The thing I do, the problem I have with making recipes is I never weigh anything. So I'm the opposite to you. Like I hate weighing stuff, and so for me, I just chuck it in the bowl and I'm like, that'll do. Even making the Rice Krispies, like I know it's supposed to be 300 grams of 300 grams of marshmallows and 200 grams of Rice Krispies and then like 60 grams of butter. I know that's what it's supposed to be. And I'm like, well, the bag of marshmallows is 280. That'll do. That's about 50 grams of butter. And then, it's about 200 grams of Rice Krispies. Like, that'll do.
That's exactly like him.
Yeah.
But still, it's better than no food.
Yeah, that's about the only time I don't like weighing food, is when I'm cooking.
When I'm cooking, yeah.
Like I'm the same. I just like,
that looks good.
Yeah, cook by feel.
Bella in there.
Yeah. So I think that's a great place to leave it, is like test it, experiment, and find foods and fuels that you like and that you actually want to eat. Because if you like it and you want to eat it, you're more likely to eat it. And don't save it in the pocket. Take it all the way around the countryside. Like actually eat it when you're on the bike.
Yeah,
100%.
Yeah, enjoy it.
Yeah, amazing. Well, thanks for joining me, guys. It's great chatting with you both, and hope you get back on the bike and get racing together soon.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Yeah, thanks a lot. Chat. It was awesome.
Could talk all day about this topic.
I know I can talk about this forever as well. So